Welcome to Measures of Truth, a His Dark Materials podcast. I'm Caitlin.
I'm Alan.
I'm Anya, and today we're discussing the 4th episode of the first season of His Dark Materials, Armour, spelled with a U because British English.
You mean proper English?
Sure, whatever.
This episode was written by showrunner Jack Thorne. Next year, there's going to be an adaptation of The Secret Garden coming to movie theaters that Jack wrote the screenplay for. So that's like his next big project. This episode was directed by Otto Bathurst. He directed the 2018 Robin Hood. If you saw that at all, I really liked it. It's really goofy. It's got kind of like a steampunk thing going on and a lot of like superhero energy. He shoots like 5 arrows at once sometimes. So that's a goofy movie.
Wait, like actual steampunk or like steampunk fused with Middle Ages?
No. It's like
just steampunk.
It's weird.
Okay.
It's a weird version of Robin Hood. It has a lot of like high energy, and you could kind of feel that in this episode, I think. Because Lin-Manuel Miranda joins the cast in this episode, who is an actor best known for the one episode that he did of How I Met Your Mother.
Definitely. Has anyone here seen Hamilton?
I have.
Okay. Yeah, I have.
I have not.
Okay. Lone holdout.
I have not. I have not even. I know of Hamilton, but I haven't listened to it or anything. But I know, osmosis.
I have a lot of funny stories about seeing it, but this is neither the time nor place. But I shall simply say that we spent hundreds of dollars on those tickets. So presumably so did everybody else there, and the dude sitting in front of me definitely fell asleep before intermission.
Oh my.
This week's episode, Lee and his rabbit demon Hester, the true star of the series, arrive in Trollesund to search for an old friend, York the Armored Bear. There is no you in that armor right there.
Oh. Sorry.
York the Armored Bear, after hearing a rumor that he's nearby and has been tricked out of his armor. Meanwhile, the Egyptians are also in Trollesund to meet with the witch's consul to send a message to Serafina Pekkala asking for help. The consul confirms that the magisterium is bringing children through Trollesund to a place farther inland where they do a secret process called intercision. That sounds happy. The consul also recommends that they hire the services of the town's armored bear. Lyra and Farder Coram attempt to hire York, but he says he is not for sale. Serafina's hawk demon, Kaisa, arrives and talks to Farder Coram and John Faw, pledging Serafina's support, but warning that not all of the witches are on their side. Lyra finds Lee and asks him for help getting York on their side. She uses the alethiometer to find out where the magisterium is hiding York's armor and tells the bear. After a quick rampage, York retrieves his armor and Lyra stops him from taking vengeance on the town. Lee and York join the Egyptians and the caravan begins making their way overlands towards the station with the children.
Meanwhile, Mrs. Coulter is called to the magisterium headquarters so they can punish her for the raid at Jordan College. They tell her that she's been removed from her position, but then she reveals that she has captured Lord Asriel, who is being guarded by armored bears in the north, and uses this as leverage to not only keep control of the oblation board, but gain support for a voyage north and the privilege to ask one question of the magisterium's alethiometer. She asks, who is Lyra Balakwa? Balakwa? I don't know.
Whatever.
Later, Lord Boreal barges in and also demands to ask a question of the alethiometer. How can I find what Grumman discovered? Mrs. Coulter quickly travels north on a Magisterium airship and has a secret meeting with the King of the Bears, Yofer Ragnarsson, to try and get Azrael back from where he's being held prisoner. When Yofer initially refuses, she promises him a Magisterian baptism, the first ever for a bear, and then he agrees. So what did people think about this episode?
I think some mistakes were made, but overall, it was a very good episode.
Were they...
Hester, really brings it up a level.
So they were goose-related mistakes or other... No?
I mean, that was number one. I'm just going to get into this here. Oh, no, you know what? I put it in my least favorite part. I'll do it there.
Okay.
Carry on.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I mean, I liked it. Hester was fabulous. Yorick was fabulous. Pan was great. The humans were okay, I guess.
Yeah, I thought this episode didn't seem as exciting or flashy as the past episodes, but I still found it very enjoyable, and I really, really loved the Trolloson set and all of the CGI, both for Yorick and for Hester, and just to make Wales look like Norway. I think they absolutely pulled that off, and of course they pulled off Yorick, both in terms of how he looks and how his voice worked, and thank God, because otherwise it would have been a rough episode.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. When you say flashy, do you mean like kind of like the stylish camera stuff that was happening in the first couple of episodes is not here? It's like more straightforward.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just like kind of the rough sets versus the like very Art Deco or like old school academic feel from previous episodes. I don't know.
It's more of a frontier town, and there's not like... Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of flair to it. That's true.
Maybe I just didn't get as much Mrs. Coulter as I wanted.
Well, yeah, that's definitely true. I really liked this episode too. The energy feels different like right away because we do that opening with Lee, and so we get that really great shot of like Lyra going towards the shore and the mountain at the prow of the boat and all of that stuff. And so I felt like the energy that we have through the entire episode and a little bit of a difference in Lyra's character in this one makes enough room for a couple more characters to join the party.
Okay, so I think I figured out what I meant by exciting and flashy, and I think it's all about the emotions of the characters. We're coming off of 2 back-to-back episodes where like Lyra finds out some really heavy shit about her family, and there's like screaming and fighting, and I don't know, the fights here, the stakes just didn't seem that important, and like the emotional notes they didn't like pull at my heartstrings as much. It was just kind of like shit happened that needed to happen before we could like set off on the journey that we actually care about.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that we're not as inside of these people as we have been for the past couple episodes.
Yeah. So I guess, it wasn't bad, but it just felt like a little bit of a letdown compared to what came before it, if that makes sense.
We did get some emotion from Coram.
That's true.
And his backstory. And I do think the next episode from like the online synopsises is going to be very emotional.
Yeah.
So I think this is kind of like a
breathing point.
Yeah, a calm before the storm, before we head into the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's got a lot of feel good bounce to it, which was the thing that, that I really noticed. Even, when we're leaving, like the way that Lee, smiles at Lyra when Yorick roars at the end and all of that stuff. Like, yeah, we got him. Like there's a lot of feel good stuff in this episode around things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I did notice like a lot of duality and, like pairs of things and stuff. And I'll talk more about that as we dig into the episode.
Okay. So favorite parts?
Hester.
What about her?
She's amazing and I love her and I want her.
You like the voice actress?
Yeah, she's really good.
She is good.
And she just looks so cute. I want a hug. Screw Lin-Manuel. Give me Hester.
Wow. You're really into Hester. Yeah.
I like bunnies. And whoever put Mrs. Coulter's hat here, screw you. Because that hat was fucking ridiculous.
It was the first thing you said when you watched the episode in the group chat was just, oh my God, that hat. So I had to put it somewhere.
So bad. It's bigger than her head. What? Why? Who made that choice?
So that's like the number 2 mistake?
Yeah. Yeah, no goose and that fucking hat.
So my favorite part of this episode where there were a lot of really cool moments with between Lyra and Lee and Fardakorum. I love when they first meet and Lee tries to talk to Fardakorum and he's like, I'm just following her. That whole, like, there's just like a lot of subtle like face acting and attention, and I love it as Lee is like very slowly realizing that Lyra's the player and everyone else is just kind of following her. I love Daphne Keene's face when she says another time and then just like walks off. She's like so fucking sassy and I'm here for it. And then there was another subtle moment that I really liked that was when Kaisa shows up. You can just see like how uncomfortable John Fa is with having a demon there without a human in a way that Fardakorum isn't. Mm. And I thought that was like a really nice like character beat and world building touch.
Yeah.
I also really liked that bit.
I didn't notice that, but that's a really good point. Yeah, that's cool. I really liked the Magisterium stuff that we got in this, which was the minority of the episode. But I really like how it connects to the other bits of the Magisterium that we've been shown so far. And it kind of shows you, instead of telling you, that the Magisterium is this kind of headless monster where no one's really in charge. Because like way back in episode 1, we have McPhail and Boreal together and he's like, you know, like, go out, my apprentice, and wrangle Coulter. She's done too much, you know, whatever. And then episode 2, we get, you know, McPhail is like praying, and then the cardinal comes up to him and he's like, how dare you interrupt oh, my lord, I'm so sorry. And you're like, oh, okay, so is this dude in charge or is this other weird guy in charge? And now, you know, it comes to Mrs. Coulter is getting sat down and they're like, you're fired. And she's like, no, I'm promoted. And so there's like this full circle thing going on where they tried to wrangle Coulter.
It's like a rock, paper, scissors of who's in charge of the Magisterium.
Yeah. And it shows you how the place operates, right? It's all like fear and who has, you know, the inside dirt on who. Like the only reason that any of them are concerned with the truth, which is such a huge theme in this story, is to leverage it against each other. Everybody's got secrets, right? That's the only place the truth exists in the Magisterium, is in secrets. So it's just really well done, I think, the way that they show you that instead of just telling you, like, there's no pope. There's just nobody in charge.
Okay, Caitlin, are you ready for your goose rant?
Oh my God. Okay, here's what happened. I'm watching the episode. I'm on my computer. Everything's fine. I'm having a good time. The bird comes in. I'm like, oh, yay, it's going to be Kaisa. It lands. I paused the episode and out loud I said, where the fuck is the goose? And then I walked away and did not watch the rest of that episode for 2 days.
Oh my God.
That is outrage.
It like completely changes who Seraphina is. Why would they do that? And also, geese are amazing and wonderful and slightly evil. And I think that says so many good things about Seraphina. And they're so... What does a hawk say? A hawk says, oh, look, it's another character with a generic bird of prey, like every other character who has a bird demon in this fucking show. Why can't somebody have some personality?
That's fair. And also, geese are really hot right now. They, like, didn't capitalize on the cultural capital of geese right now.
True, but they made this decision months ago.
Yeah.
So they didn't know that geese were going to be the thing, which they should have, because geese have always been the thing.
So to be clear, for folks who have not read the book, but have been following along with our coverage of the show.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
In the book, Kaisa is a goose. Yeah, we did the same thing when we were watching it. Like, me and Christina were like, hang on a second. That is not a goose. What is happening?
But a goose is so big and, like, scary. People don't like geese. And I think that says a lot about Seraphina. And why a hawk? It's such
a strange choice.
Like, I like a good hawk. They're very nice looking birds, but everybody who has a bird in this show either has a raven crow looking thing or has a generic looking bird of prey. Like, these people need some personality.
There were some little songbirds in the Egyptian crew from episode 1, but for the most part, you're correct.
Yeah, it's just weird.
Characters we know, I
Yeah.
mean. Not everybody has to have, like, a hawk is not cooler than a goose, which is what I feel like is the only thing I can come up with as to why they would have made this decision.
They just didn't think
They thought a goose would look ridiculous. And I'm like, that's part of their charm? And they're still scary as fuck.
I mean, if you have to class up a goose, just make it a swan, right? That's the obvious move.
I don't know. Have you ever seen a swan fly? It looks fucking ridiculous. It looks, because the neck is so long.
They're also mean as shit. Like,
Well, so are geese.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. They, like, have the same general personality thing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
So I'm very upset.
Alan?
I am also upset. Listeners don't know this, but I have been carving hash marks into the wall of the room that I record in every episode that James McAvoy is not shirtless. And I have 4 gouges in my wall now because he has not been on the show since the first one. And I was kind of hoping that we would actually get to see his capture and imprisonment in the show. Like, the book follows Lyra so closely in the first novel. And we just don't, we don't get any of Lord Asriel, really. But we've been following the other characters and all this magisterium business. And so this moment with Mrs. Coulter, where she just kind of whips out on McPhail and the Cardinal, like, oh, I've got Asriel in my back pocket. It's like, comes from nowhere. This has not been set up in the story at all. And I'm kind of disappointed about that. Like, how did he get captured? Are we going to see that? Is he going to take his shirt off? Like, when is this going to happen?
Well, they're heading into the snowy north, so chances of being shirtless, I think, are decreasing, unfortunately. I know. But there's always season 2.
I kind of agree with what you're saying, but also, like, I really loved that reveal from Mrs. Coulter when she was just like, I have Asriel. So sit the fuck
It's
down,
Yeah.
sir.
No, you're right.
It was so good.
The dramatic suspense in that scene was really good, and it would have been. I mean, I guess we could have shown him getting captured and not let on that it was Mrs. Coulter pulling the strings, but it worked very well as a surprise.
What about you? Do you have a least favorite part?
It was really hard for me to come up with the least favorite part in this one. Like, I would say this is probably my least favorite episode, but none of the parts stood out as, like, particularly bad. I guess, I don't know, if anything, I kind of disagree with your take on Lee's energy. Like, I really like Lee when he's interacting with the characters that we know and love, because I feel like he brings it down a notch. But when he's the main one on screen, he's, like, bringing a little bit too much Broadway for me, and it feels like it doesn't mesh with the rest of the show in a weird way. Like, it's not bad. It feels like he walked in off a different show.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess is maybe what they're paying him to do, and I just happen to not like it. So
Yeah, I guess it's because, like, I know that Robin Hood movie, which is also, like, on a different energy level than, like, a normal, I'm gonna go see an action movie and, like, oh, this is an action movie. Like, this director, just the energy that he's bringing to, like, the entire episode is exactly like you said. It's out of step with the rest of the show. So I think that's a completely valid criticism. Like, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you.
yeah, I get the feeling that it might work better on rewatches or in a marathon context, but we'll have to see. Okay, and today we're very excited to share that we have a special guest who has been lurking silently in the background and listening to us babble. So Francis is a friend of mine, and I was asking him for his take on some of the Egyptian accents, and then we ended up having a conversation that I thought was kind of fun and interesting and would be worth sharing here. So I'm bringing him on as our senior British correspondent. Taking a cue from the Daily Show. Oh, deep cut. And so, yeah, I guess
I'll take that.
welcome to the show, Francis. And maybe you can give us your sort of general take on the accents on the show in general, and specifically the Egyptian accents, since I think they're a little bit different than, the ones that we hear from Lyra and Asriel and Mrs. Coulter. And, to my American ears, I can tell that they're different, but that's basically about all I can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Britain more generally has quite a wide variety of accents. Even you go maybe 20 miles down the road and you can have almost a completely different accent and a very distinctive one. And they do kind of pull on that, particularly for the Egyptians, which we'll get to in a bit. Looking at, say, Lyra or Azrael, they all have kind of your classic, fairly well-spoken, obviously academic sorts of accents. Their elocution's pretty good. And they're going for that general sort of Middle England, well-educated sort of vibe. An interesting point to note is James McAvoy is obviously Scottish, but his accent is very much not Scottish, certainly for Azrael. But also we, from various other McAvoy films and TV things, we know that he can do a lot. He can do very many accents.
Pulling it off successfully.
Yeah, definitely. He certainly doesn't sound like his actual accent, which I think, for someone who I can't do accents at all. I find them super interesting, but I have no talent with them. So to me, it's super impressive. But yeah, going on to the Egyptians. So the question, Anya, that you asked me was sort of what accent do the Egyptians have? And they don't pull one accent for the Egyptians. That much is kind of fairly obvious, but if you drill down into it, you really see that the thing that brings them all together is that they are these sort of working class accents, traditionally speaking. So there's, if you've got slang, you'll have more of it. The words will have a tendency to have more regional dialect changes. So, and they are kind of sampled from across the country. Certainly from the ones we've heard so far, we may hear more, and they may sample. I've noticed a particular lack of kind of southwest, but there's definitely some northern and definitely some kind of central London, which is very, very clear, certainly to someone who hears those quite regularly. So going into some specifics, Mark Hoster is kind of the first one that jumped out to me, where she has what kind of jumped out to me as a Manchester or sort of Huddersfield accent, that sort of Snake Pass, M62 area. And I was foxed by it for a little bit, because to me it just came across as somewhere northern, again going for this working class sort of vibe. But then looking a little bit more at Anne-Marie Duff's kind of back catalogue, she had a major part in Shameless, which was a UK TV show if you don't know it, and that's based in Manchester. So I would stake a lot of money on her aiming for that same sort of accent, and it does come across, and the more you hear it, the more you say that's probably a Manchester accent in some regard, or certainly kind of harping towards that. So that was the obvious one initially. Contrast that to her son Tony. Now Tony has a very much more distinctively London accent. He's there's a lot more in the terms of glottal stops. He says things like glass rather than glass. Maybe not specifically that, but that long A rather than the short A. And that is interesting and fairly well done, but also you can tell just on occasion, because I live quite near London, so I hear these accents all the time. And you can tell that there's actually something else in there, and it turns out that Daniel Frogson is in fact from Nottingham. So there were these ever so like small lilts of Midlands accent to it. So it's for the most part London. That's really what they're kind of pushing for there. But just occasionally I was hearing a word and saying that doesn't sound quite like it.
So you think that's just his natural accent slipping through?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not precisely sure. I mean, again, they were all doing accents, and I can't do accents, so it's always going to slip through a bit. But the things that I noticed, they were kind of muddied around the places where, say, Nottingham accents or kind of more generally Midlands accents are different from the London.
It's interesting that they went with, like a parent-child pair having accents that are so different from each other.
Yeah, that jumped out to me immediately, and then the more I thought about it, the more I said, well, actually, that makes sense, because you don't have the accent of your parents; you have the accent of where you grew up. So we don't know that much about. Well, in fact, we know quite a lot about Mark Hoster. Thinking about it, we know that in 1985, I think in the timeline, she looks after Lyra briefly, and that's actually mentioned in the episode. And then so we know that she's definitely been hanging around the Oxford area for a while, and we can assume that seeing as her son is approximately the same age, or certainly a similar age, then he's probably grown up around that area as well. So it makes more sense for him to have a southern accent, even though she has a northern accent.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
I'm trying to think of other ones that we had. Oh yeah, John Farr. Now, John Farr foxed me because the accent is not British. And I kind of puzzled over this for a little while, trying to work out where it was from. But again, I did my looking around and look at Lucian Masmati. I researched that for so long and I still stumble over it. He's from Zimbabwe, and so whilst his general speaking voice, if you listen to interviews with him, he's a very, very good Shakespearean actor. He does very many things all over with a huge range of, again, accents and time periods as well. But I do believe he's kind of at least leaning on that kind of Zimbabwe-esque, slightly just different accent, which you don't hear, but that really stands out for John Farr as a character, that he's such a strong person, such a strong influence, and it kind of just brings him out from the rest of the Egyptians. I
like that. He's kind of separated from everybody, which you constantly get with his character, where people are always arguing with him, or he's having to like tell people what to do, and that leadership is, kind of alienates him from the rest of the group, and it's even reflected in the choice of the accents. So that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And you can see even when there's later on in the episode, there's conflict between John Farr and Lyra, and you can see where he suddenly sticks out as he's there for the good of the Egyptians, but he's got very, very strong beliefs on what should be done, and that is the way it is.
And this is kind of skipping ahead to something that you have lower down in the doc, but having that kind of non-British accent in the mix, it really gives the feel that the Egyptians are kind of like from all over, and like very much, like they have a distinct culture, but they also are kind of like disparate and spread out, and have influences from a lot of different places.
Absolutely. I found it, the way that they tied the Egyptians together as an obvious culture, whilst having them, as you say, very disparate, was really, really elegantly done. Even just looking at the materials they're using for their clothing, the styles, you've got sort of a lot of things like knitwear, very practical things if you're out on a boat in the wet, relatively exposed quite a lot of the time. You're going to want these sorts of relatively hardy but practical gear, but they're also quite colourful. If you look at, there's a lot of different colours coming out, but in a very different way to, say, Coulter's colours, where she wears a dress and there'll be one lovely satin dress or similar in, say, blue, and then everything will be very well coordinated, and it is just this kind of royal blue or this scarlet red. And then the Egyptians have very much more these ever so slightly more pastel-y colours. They look like slightly cheaper dyes, they look like a slightly more rough and ready approach, but they're also, you can tell that they're well worn, they look sometimes patched. I thought that was just such a brilliant way of giving this feel to this culture, which you don't usually think of.
Yeah, and they also have much more like mixed color palettes, like lots of, like the patterns are kind of bright and loud and multicolored.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to think of, the only other accent which I still struggle to kind of work out is Farder Coram, because his accent doesn't fit the rest of this archetype of the traditionally or stereotypically working class. It's very much, it's kind of an enigma to me there. It's just a very neutral, he's well spoken, but he's not super, there's not great pronunciation all the time, but he's very clear. He gets his points across very well. But at the same time, it's definitely, he definitely still lives on a boat, if that makes sense.
That makes sense to me for book Coram. I don't know if they're going in the same direction with TV Coram, but in the book, he was, he grew up Egyptian, obviously, and he was kind of like a the only word that's coming to mind is warrior. Soldier is what I was going for.
A little less dramatic.
And yes. And that until he got sick and his illness, like, you know, he was disabled after that. And so then all that he had previously put into his, like, being fit and able, he put into learning and traveling or not traveling, but like he became like
an intellectual.
Yeah, an intellectual. There we go. And so that to me makes sense that he would have started with this like Egyptian accent route and perhaps gone somewhere else with it.
Yeah.
That's quite nice.
I mean, he had to end up in a place where he was interacting with witches a lot. And so he's clearly like been some places and done some shit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. He's seen the world, and it kind of, as you say, it feels like it started from traditional Egyptian, and then he's seen things, and he's just picked up things along the way. And so he gets this very kind of chimeral accent, where it's just a little bit of everything all at once, and it's very hard to place. And I don't know if that's intentional, but it certainly adds to it for me.
Yeah, the thing here in the TV show is that he doesn't, like in the book, I think he walks with a cane, and he's very obviously not as able-bodied as he was when he was younger, pre the illness. So, but they haven't done that in the show, so I don't know what they're really doing with his character here.
What is the timeline of that in the books? I don't, so not too much on the books, but
it was he was young. He met Serafina. They had a kid. The kid died. They separated. He got ill. She sent him something to help him get better, which kind of helped a bit. And they still haven't seen each other since.
That's interesting because, like, when you think about the demon coming, if that did happen, in the history of this adaptation, that it kind of explains elements of his embarrassment, or like, kind of like, he's like, yeah, I don't look like I used to. And it's not just about age there. Maybe it might be, something related to the illness. So that's interesting.
That particular scene did really feel like he was talking to an ex-lover. It was quite stark, considering he's talking to a bird. And I'm not going to say the big old H word there, because a pseudo goose, if you will.
Yes. As Caitlin keeps impressing upon me, it's not just an animal; it's actually a part of the soul. So it's hard as a non-demon having human to like really keep the importance of that in my mind all the time.
I think that's particularly striking for the also in general in the series. That's probably one of the first times we've seen someone interact with another person's demon, but not really with the person, obviously, because in this case the person is not there. Right. But it's almost jarring to see, because nearly always the demons are there in the background, or the demons communicate with each other and the people communicate with each other. But to see this kind of crossover, it almost feels taboo.
Oh, it definitely does, and that's why I love John Fah's acting so much, because he's not saying anything, but you can tell he is like so upset, just like visibly unsettled.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I really, really like that bit.
I'm sad we didn't get to see Kaisa and Sophonax interact. That was Quorum's demon.
Do they in the book?
I don't think they do. At least, no, I wouldn't think so. I don't. It never. I don't remember it ever mentioning that they did, but still would have been nice. Oh well.
It does feel like they have still got the point across that the witches and their demons are all very aloof.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they kind of engage with the rest of society. They are just their own little thing, and they kind of don't really care for the petty squabbles of the mortal man.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember when in the book we find out about the whole lore for how like witches and their male lovers, like how witch reproduction works, basically.
It's later on during the chapter of ballooning and exposition.
Okay. So potentially still coming.
Potentially.
The only other thing I have kind of written down here is just an interesting side note of when I was looking a little bit at the Egyptians and their culture across all of the different interpretations that we've had of this story, and one of the things I came across was that they, in the continuity, the Fens of East Anglia were sort of settled by the Dutch. So they came into the fens and they diked them all up and they kind of drained parts of the fen to make it more livable. Still relatively dangerous, and they do actually come back to that much, much later. In fact, not even in this trilogy. But the Dutch came over, they diked it all up, they settled down, and then there's kind of a Creole that forms, which is called Fens Dutch, and it's a mix of the English at the time with certain Dutch influences and Dutch words. So whilst it's not mentioned very heavily, it's kind of hinted at that the Egyptians, they have their own words, they have their own sort of lexicon. Again, it's almost a Creole, which is I would kind of like to see a little bit more of in the show. I know that it's quite hard to do, but if you look at things like The Expanse, or I suppose to an extent Serenity, though it's a little bit more kind of clumsy in Firefly Serenity, where they're mixing Mandarin with English. But certainly in The Expanse, they're bringing together a few different languages, and
I would love that.
It's done really very well, but it's really a Creole. It's not these two languages anymore. It's people using this combination of various different sort of providences of language all together as one as their native tongue.
And so just to be clear, based on the fact that I know very little about British history, this is just book lore. That's not something that happened in real life. There are no Fens Dutch in actual England. Okay, great.
No, that did not happen. I can't remember what actually happened to the Fens over the years. I believe it probably got hit by the Saxons. Most things got hit by the Saxons, followed by the Normans. I don't know if they got raided by the Vikings. It feels like a sort of place which would, but that's just because it's wet.
Wow.
It's a nice place, though. Do go if you ever get the opportunity.
What part of the country is it in?
The kind of southeast.
Is that
southeast to mid-east?
Is that Essex?
A bit above
Okay,
Essex.
so not the Jersey Shore of England.
No.
That's what... I didn't make that up, okay? I'm just repeating what I've been told.
I will not make a comment on there.
I don't think it was you. I think it was before I knew you.
Well, either way, I stand by my point. Yeah, I think that's...
Well, Francis, we made you sit quietly during like our general impressions and favorite parts and least favorite parts. So I would love to hear like your general impressions of this episode.
Oh yeah, so overall, I did like this episode. It was a real change of pace. It felt like the brakes had been put on the exposition train, and we were sort of digging a little bit deeper into, not necessarily into the characters. We were introducing new people. Like, it was lovely to meet Lee and Yorick, even though I did feel that Trollesond was kind of a touch convenient. It felt like if you're running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign or something, and everyone all just runs into each other in a tavern, and no one really, like, they have their reasons for being there, but it did feel a touch contrived, but it feels a touch contrived in the book as well. So I can't hold that against the show itself. I did really like the fact that Lee brings this lighter sort of fun tone, which we haven't really had for, really at all. He's kind of, there's a little wink, there's a little nod, there's a cheeky grin. And he also brings that not only to the series as a whole, but within the lore to the kind of crew that they're building up. He is the humour, he is that cheek, he is the silver-tongued one, if you will. For now. But yeah, I
subtle, very subtle.
Spoilers.
Oh, the books had been out a long time. But yeah, this overall, this episode felt like the end of Act 1. And then Act 2, we're going into the north, and like right at the end of the episode, they're going off on foot. These Egyptians we've only seen them really on their boats. And they've struck off on foot, and with the tracked vehicle as well, but ignoring that again. And it feels like the start of the next act. If you split the book into 2 acts, it kind of sits. This is that halfway point. Yeah. So that was my general impression.
That's great.
I love that you picked that out too, that the Egyptians are now kind of out of their element. I spent a lot of time obsessing over like how much detail to include in the summary, and it seemed like a big enough detail that it was like worth writing down.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it was it just struck me as this felt like a stop.
Yeah.
Why did it feel like
that
a stop?
That final scene, all these boat people trudging over land.
Yeah.
And in that final scene, it is like you see a bird fly overhead. That is Kaisa, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I thought so too.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, if it had been a big black goose, we definitely would have known.
Right.
Like, you could not have mistaken it for anything else.
Maybe someone else could have had a goose demon. Like,
oh, what an affront if that happened. Could you imagine?
I would be even angrier.
What about your favorite part?
Yeah, so my favorite part, I'd say I loved seeing a bit more of Father Corum's kind of transition from this very stoic figure, as Lyra doesn't really know him much, and then as she gets to know him, we get to know him. So he turns from this like father figure into a very emotional guy very, very quickly, as he starts talking about Seraphina and starts talking about his son, and you can see him, his resolve really crumbles very quickly and very visibly, like, again, testament to the acting here. And it suddenly, you look at him in a very different light, and you see him through kind of adult eyes rather than a child's eyes for a second. And the other major one was, I love Lee and Hester. To me, it was exactly how I imagined it and how I read it in the books. They felt like friends. They felt like absolute best friends. While some of the demons, it feels like they're in servitude. Particularly, the classic would be Coulter and the monkey demon.
Right.
Like, that feels like he is servile, whilst Hester feels like your best mate. You go to the pub with her. I mean, you'd buy her a shot rather than a pint, but I'm not sure if that counts as like animal abuse. I mean, that's a whole other ethical kettle of fish. Which
I don't think demons can consume things like eat or drink. I don't think that is a thing, because then they'd have to
poop
deal with
and
it.
we just don't want to think about
that's
that.
True. Yeah.
And soul poop. Yeah. What is that?
But I agree, because it's so nice to get this opposite view of something. There's a word for that. Whatever. Contrast. There we go. This contrast from people like Mrs. Coulter and the monkey to somebody who is so at home with themselves and good with themselves. And it makes sense for Lee, because he's alone so much on his balloon. He would have to be very okay with just being with himself. So it's nice to see that related in his relationship with Hester.
Are people less lonely in Lyra's world?
I think so. I mean, Kate's probably thought about this more than I have, but...
Well, they talk about it in the second book,
okay,
because that's when a main character is somebody like us. And I'm trying to say this as subtly as possible. And Lyra thinks about how lonely that must be to not have someone there in situations where you need someone.
Yeah.
So just very quickly going back to your point about Farder Coram and how he's humanized a lot in this episode, I was so fucking glad that they didn't do the thing that Philip Pullman did in the book, where when we first hear Farder Coram talk about Seraphina Pekkala, he's like just being a lecherous old man and totally objectifying her. It's like classic men writing about women. And I was like, when I complained about this in our book episode covering it, but it just made me so mad to read that. And then when I found out later that they actually had a relationship and a kid and all of that, I was like, okay, I'll forgive that as just an out of character moment, like the author seeping through. But so glad that there was no angle of that here.
I definitely agree that it feels out of character in the book. It doesn't feel like Coram, and I think that they made a very good choice by getting rid of that, even though it's a minor thing in what he's talking about anyway. It's really not a major part, so it's no loss. We get a better view of what Coram's really like. Maybe, I mean, we still see that he's flawed. We still see that he's got his problems, but it's just not quite as sexist.
Yeah, and like...
which I think's a good thing.
Not only does it not feel like Farder Coram, it also doesn't feel like what any man would say about like a woman who he was in love with and went through a horribly traumatic life event with. Like, that's... Anyway. Stepping down off the soapbox. Now you can complain about something. What was your least favorite part?
This is a very particular one. I really, really didn't like Hester's CGI, and it's something very specific about it, which is the face is too expressive. To me, the demons are basically animals. They communicate their excitement, their emotions through their kind of general activity and their behavior, and then maybe also their vocal tone and just the words that they actually choose. So giving them these sort of uncanny valley, pseudo-human expressions, really, it detracts from the thing that makes Lyra's world different. The sort of alienness where human and animal, or like thing that looks like animal, are one. But you can't. The whole thing is you can't really read someone else's demon very well, because they're not so innate to you. And so I found it just got to me. And same with Pan, actually. Pan smiles, and in fact, at the end of this episode, Yorick smiles, and it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like you should have a smirking polar bear. So yeah, that apparently makes me quite angry.
You know, that never would have occurred to me, but now that you mention it, I totally see what you're saying.
I don't mind it on Yorick because he's like a full and complete being with emotions. But
I agree with that. Yeah.
I agree about the demons. They are making some strange choices with the demons, from my point of view.
I don't think it's bad. It's just, it drags me out of it. The rest of this is such a brilliantly faithful adaptation, and then that just jars me away, and I go, that's not how it goes. That's not how that looks. Like, yeah, there were things later, quite a lot later on, which I'll be really interested to see if they can get the emotion through whilst having something that I can only describe as looking like a slightly off cut of Watership Down sort of thing. That might be too mean. I really love the show, guys. It's fine.
One of the things in the book that they do is Pan expresses his emotions a lot through changing forms.
Yes.
And I can understand where maybe money-wise they just couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do. He flits between forms when he's agitated.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. And when they're fighting as well.
But also I remember, like, there's a specific scene in the book where, in the second book, where he's one animal. I forget what animal that is. But then he does something, and right after he feels kind of like shy, so he immediately changes into a moth and goes right back to Lyra. And like stuff like that, when he changes into things to either hide what he's feeling or thinking, or that type of thing. And like there's one scene where he turns into like the saddest little puppy dog.
Aww.
You know, and that sort of thing. So they're not really doing that.
Yeah, we'll see, I think. I obviously, as you said, it costs money to model a new animal, and I think that's also one of the reasons why we don't see quite such a diverse set of demons. There's a lot of dogs, there's a lot of birds, and it's not jarring. It just, the more you think about it, the more you go, I kind of want a few more.
I did notice it was like the same black dog in Trollesund that was searching the Egyptian barge looking for Lyra.
Oh yeah, and that was the same dog that's also standing guard outside the one of the Magisterium.
Yeah. I liked it in the Magisterium because it gave it all uniform, and it puts the idea in your head that these guards are like raised in a specific environment from when they're kids and told that this is what your demon is going to be, and this is who you are, and this is what you're doing.
Stormtroopers,
you know. And I actually kind of like that, like that the idea that these guards are raised from their kids to be who and what they are, and are kind of forced into being a certain type of person.
Yeah,
but
that sounds evil.
It is, exactly. That's why I like it. But they probably just did that because it looked cool. And meanwhile, I'm like, that's actually a really cool story point when you really read into how people's demons settles. But I get the feeling that the show isn't putting that much thought into settled demons of the background characters. I think that's just me. So
it is also mentioned by Philip Pullman that he certainly mentions when they're fighting the Skraelings, I think, or something like that.
There are people who all have wolf demons.
Yeah. Well, they all have huskies, I think. What's the other one?
Maybe it was the Tartars?
Yeah.
something.
Oh yeah, it might be the
Yeah.
Tartars.
It was a
yeah,
certain
you're right.
brand of
Yeah,
like
you're right.
warrior
Yeah.
people that the Magisterium hired, or Mrs. Coulter.
Yeah, it was the Tartars. You're right. What one thing I just generally want to point out, because me and all the biologist friends I have, there was a message that went around between all of us saying, "Oh my God, the librarian's demon is the sweetest thing." It's just this little sort of salamander, and I don't know why it spoke to everyone, but my God, it did. That is the most adorable little thing.
And when she went off, the love was like, "Here's the book." That was so good.
It was like, oh.
Mm-hmm. Of course it can like crawl along the surface of books like up and down, and it'd be like, oh, yep, this is the one. Like that's why it is what it is. Like it's perfect.
Yeah, I liked...
How interesting also.
There was another reptile demon this episode too, right? One of the Magisterium.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we've had a couple snakes too. So herps are getting
snakes.
some
Well,
representation.
Unlike fish.
Yeah.
Somebody walking around with like a bowl. And, like, yeah, he's in there.
I have an 8-kilo tuna.
Okay, while we're talking about demons, so for people listening, we are recording these episodes early. So I think we're recording this in between episode 2 and episode 3 airing. And because of episode 2, I keep getting all these like articles popping up where His Dark Materials has given a canon reason for why we don't see the demons that they're not making. And people are saying that when Boreal was in our world and tells what's-his-face computer dude that, we don't always have our demons on display. Like, that they put that in there so that we would think that's why we're not always seeing people's demons.
Because they're just always in people's pockets.
It's literally what you said in the first episode. Exactly.
But A, what a cop-out. And B, I thought that was like a character moment, not like a please don't blame us for not spending all that money moment. Like, but I've had like multiple, Google has just been feeding me all these articles and I'm like, wow, I just don't think it was that important.
You think they're like
weak.
paying to
I don't
push
like
this
that.
propaganda?
Maybe. Well, I mean, obviously because we do this, I get a lot of His Dark Materials stuff. Like Google just thinks I want it.
And Google's
So-
not wrong, so.
Yeah, that's fair.
Is this the new conspiracy theory? No, it's just lots of pocket demons.
Everybody's got a Pokeball with their demon in it. That would be useful for something like Stel Maria, whatever.
Oh man. Actually, this is reminding me, I basically had a snake demon for like a large part of middle school.
I'm sorry. While you were in middle school, you took your soul out of your
Well,
body
okay.
and put it, and you had a snake
And
now.
the snake talked.
Well, there was-
Didn't we all?
Yeah.
There was
I wish, actually, yeah.
a snake in the biology room, and we got very friendly, and I would take it out of the cage after school, and it would like crawl up through, like I had my hair in a ponytail, and it would
Oh Jesus!
crawl up between the ponytail band and my scalp, and then like curl on top of my head.
I would have lost my mind.
So Anya is a Slytherin.
Wait, with like in a good way or a bad way?
No, in a bad way. In my hair? No, I don't mind snakes, but not in my
Oh
hair.
no, we were
Ugh.
great. We were great friends, and I would like walk around and like run errands, and then occasionally people would be like, "Oh my God, there's a snake in your hair," and I'd be like, "Yeah, whatever." That maybe explains some things about me.
It's very metal. Very metal of you.
For real.
It's not metal at all. Snakes are cool.
The true chest of metal. It's like being a real hipster.
You don't hang out with enough biologists. Francis, you're on my side, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people with skinks on their shoulders just day to day, and you're like, how do you have that? Why? What? You're just in the office, and there's just a skink on your shoulder.
Right, but she was in middle. She wasn't Anya, you were not a biologist at the time. You were
I guess
12.
no, but I was in biology class
Uh-huh.
in a way.
Okay.
In a way, but more accurately, you're outside in the corridors with a snake in your
Yeah,
hair.
it's fine.
I mean, if you were wanting to intimidate the other kids and tell them to fuck off, I'd be 100% behind this. But if you were just like, I just like having a snake in my hair, that's a little bit odd.
I mean, the snake liked it as much or more than I did, so. I mean,
If the snake didn't like it, you'd have no snake in your hair.
Yeah.
it was probably all body heat related. Let's be honest. I wasn't like putting emotions onto the snake, but I enjoyed it. Okay, how are you feeling, Francis? Are you like about to pass out? Want to keep going?
I'm chill.
Okay.
Yeah, all good.
All right, I'm going to take an aside before we go into the episode for a new segment that I am calling Caitlin's Knitting Corner. Because
I like this.
So I had a discussion with some folks on Twitter about Lyra's hat in this episode, which previously, if you do follow us on Twitter, you'll see that I did kind of knit up a crappy replica of it from what I could tell of its construction from the not great pictures we had previous to the show premiering. But in this episode, we do finally get a very up close, good look at the hat, and it confused the crap out of me. Because if you look at it, you will notice that the red hat has like these bumps that stick out along it and then all come together at the top. And I thought that that was like a normal pearl knit rib, which is how you would do that with a normal hat, which is what I did in my replica. But in the up close, I could see that the more down stitches, I don't know how to explain this in non-knitting terms, are going in the opposite direction as the bump up ones, which is just not, I would have no idea how to do that in normal knitting. So I was talking with at Fool for a Toque and at Sarah Louise, there's a lot of E's in there, on Twitter. And Sarah pointed out that this was a special type of knitting that I had never personally come across before. It was like a Latvian Estonian braid on the hat. So I'm going to look into that and hopefully revisit my recreating of the hat.
Wait, when did you post this on Twitter? I'm looking for the picture so I can... We'll post...
The picture of my hat?
Yeah. Or the hat that you made. Didn't you just say you posted a picture of your hat?
Yeah, on the Measures of Truth.
Yeah.
It's on the Measure of Truth.
Yeah, you can also see a little bit of me, which I don't actually do that much on the internet. Sorry about my face.
We'll link to it in the show notes so you don't have to scroll through Twitter forever like I am doing currently.
Anyways, so I was just really happy to get that information, and we talked about how the Estonia Latvian knitting would probably have originated from the area of the world that they are currently in. So it just made sense that the costume department put all that into this one little hat. And we talked about that a lot, and it was cool. And I'm interested to learn this new type of knitting that I don't know. And also, Lyra is wearing a yellow scarf in this episode, which didn't get a good look at. So to be continued on the scarf.
I was going to say, I really loved the hat, scarf, coat combo that they have her in all primary colors, and they look really good and striking together. The like red, yellow, and blue. I
despise the color yellow, so I will not be making a replica of that scarf.
So I felt like that ensemble was kind of symbolic. So I've been, I've been tracking the different colors, and I feel strongly that blue is like the Mrs. Coulter color and the Magisterium color, and then red is like the Jordan College, kind of the Shire color, and then gold or yellow was what Lord Asriel was kind of sporting with that fur-lined jacket that he had while he was like looking off into the middle distance with his backpack slung over his shoulder. Scene that I watched over and over on a loop. Anyway, so I feel like there you get the Jordan College on her head, Lord Asriel wrapped around her, and then the Mrs. Coulter, your color is blue. And all of those are Egyptian clothes. And so you have like a synthesis of all of these people that make up who Lyra is becoming in just right there in her outfit. And like you said, Francis, it kind of like helps to work to close that first act, right? She's like stepping into her new character.
Yeah, I really like that.
And she does get rid of the blue coat in this episode. Yeah.
Pretty quick, yeah.
And I like the fur coat a lot better. It looks cozy and less like a poncho on her.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like she put on John Faw's jacket, the blue one.
I thought they were both cute in different ways, okay?
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying it's not cute. I'm just saying I like the one that actually fits her.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it does look more comfortable and nicer, and I'm just gonna go whole hog. I much prefer that coat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's might just because it's getting really, really cold here.
Yeah, it definitely looked warmer, at least.
All right, shall we get into the episode proper? Oh my gosh, we've been recording for over an hour.
But we've talked about so many important things.
This is true.
I hope you like cutting.
So before we get into the meat of the episode, I just have a question that I want to ask. In that first scene, when they're on their way to the witch's console, and Lyra's walking around with Fardacorum, and she's pulling the alethiometer out, and like reading it in public, and there's like all of those townspeople peeking over and like looking at her and spying on her. Was the whole point of that just so that the witch's console would know that she had it when they got there, or was there something else? It just seemed like really heavy-handed, and I was trying to figure out like what it meant or how it was gonna come back, and then it like didn't really come to that much. I don't know.
I didn't like that scene at all. I thought it was poorly written and acted and not well done. So I don't know either what they were really trying to do.
Okay, so I was not the only one who was like kind of confused with how that was executed.
Like, I can see where maybe they could have put one person in there looking at them, and then we find out later that, oh, that person was for the witch console and not like a magisterium spy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually confused me. I was looking, I was saying, well, who, like, these could be anyone. This could be leading to, like, are they magisterium informers, or like, is it just that this town is really close knit? It didn't help.
Yeah, and the magisterium already knows that she has the alethiometer, because when Mrs. Coulter is doing the raid on Jordan College, that becomes like very clear textually.
She might not have told the rest of the magisterium.
That's fair.
Yeah. I think that there's actually too many things going on in that scene, and that's what the problem is there, because I think on one level, yes, like it is setting up the thing that you're talking about where he's like, I have eyes all over the town. But the other thing that's happening is he mentions that like you didn't see any children in this town. We have also been affected. So there's a child walking around the town. Everybody's like, what the fuck? And then also the magisterium has stepped up its presence in the town. And that is making like Fardacorum nervous, and he's like seeing the magisterium soldiers, and he's like, put that away, because you know we're somebody might know what that is, and we're gonna get in trouble. So like there's and then I also think there's something going on there of like the dynamic between Fardacorum and Lyra and like what she's doing. It's setting up that like it's a bad idea to have the alethiometer out and to admit that you have an alethiometer, so that later it is Lyra deciding to reveal to the guy that like, I do have an alethiometer and I do know how to read it, against, you know, the general, not like Fardacorum told her not to say that, but like she's not taking his lead on that. She's making a choice. So that it's like doing a lot of things, which sometimes in writing, like, oh, this is impressive, but I think actually here it's like doing too much and it's confusing.
Thank you. All of those points make a lot of sense, but I was not able to pull them out in my 2 times watching this episode.
But it's also the scene where Lyra is describing to Corum and to the audience how she reads the alethiometer.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, there's way too much, right?
And I didn't really like that at all. It just felt like they picked out certain words from the book and then put them in there, but it just didn't really make any sense. If you didn't already read the book and understand what was going on.
It didn't also feel like the sort of explanation that Lyra would give.
Yeah.
It felt like Philip Pullman giving an explanation of a feeling rather than Lyra explaining how she felt something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, but speaking of Lyra and good things happening, I really loved how in this episode we finally get to see her like lying and getting creative, and
her manipulation of Lee was fabulous.
Yeah, it was so good, and it's the trait of hers that's there much more from the beginning in the book, And we've talked about how it's been kind of missing in the TV show so far. So I'm glad that we're finally getting to see that side of her.
I still don't think, like, pre her being at Bolvanger, that's probably the only instance of it that we're going to see. So I do feel like they've kind of dropped the ball on that, because I don't know. I don't know if I would believe of this Lyra the things that book Lyra does, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Is she nicer?
No, it does.
I don't know about nice. Well, I guess actually book Lyra is not a very nice person. She's a good person, but I don't know that she's very nice.
Do you mean in book one or in later books?
No, in book one. You don't really see Lyra being nice to people.
Mm-hmm. She kind of like controls every situation with her ability to tell stories or like say just the right thing in the book. And I feel like in the show, what Lyra is especially good at compared to other characters is forming emotional connections with people. And when she tries to do that with characters like Lord Asriel or Mrs. Coulter, then there's a lot of like pushback from them because they are like, there's reasons why they don't want to do that. But that's really her strength as a character, like her capability. And you see that demonstrated in this episode, you know, in terms of like she meets Lee's energy with the same kind of energy. Like he's doing whatever it takes to get the thing done and like tricking people, and she just takes that trickster energy.
He like walks into the bar and tries to challenge people to play cards, and she comes back with a poker metaphor because she knows that that's going to get him, like all of that.
Exactly. Yeah. She makes connections with people, and that's what she does in this episode. She makes that connection with Yorick. She's, you know, and with Lee, and that's how they come along.
Before we get too far away from the beginning, I did want to bring up that I loved the opening with Lee and Hester. I know we've talked about this already, and how, oh wait, maybe we did completely cover this point, because I did also bring up Mrs. Coulter and the monkey. Cut that out.
Wait, what? Oh, just like how they get along. Yeah. I mean, I really loved the monkey slap in this episode. Anytime there's a monkey slap, it's usually pretty good, but this one was no exception.
Wait, we're not going to be able to talk about that because I just fucked up everything. Do you want me to bring you back to that in a way that will work?
No, I don't care. Other people don't need to hear that. I just wanted to say that to you right now.
Okay. You just like it when a monkey gets slapped?
I just, the look... Okay, if we're going to talk about demon facial expressions, I think the way that the monkey, like, looks at Miss Coulter and keeps on trying to reach out to her, and she's like, fuck you. I'm not vulnerable in this moment. Like, I don't need you. I'm going to just be a cold-ass bitch and take care of the situation.
It makes you feel more sorry for him than I think you do in the books.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he is, like, evil incarnate in the books.
Yeah, he's a horrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe this is a good enough conversation to keep. You did fuck it all up, Caitlin. The one other thing that I wanted to say was just that I thought that the way that they portrayed Yorick's motivations for not wanting to be helped because he was stuck in like a shame cycle, I loved the way that they portrayed that. I loved the voice actor. It made me really feel for him, and it felt super realistic. I think a lot of people know what it's like to get stuck in a shame cycle like that and not want help, even when people are like trying to get you out of it and offer their assistance. I really liked the portrayal of like where he was coming from and how Lyra breaks through to him ultimately in the end.
I really loved Yorick. And when we finally see him in his armor, and then at the very end of the episode, we get that brief glimpse of Iofur Raknison and his like super duper armor, that was really good because you could tell that his was all big and fancy.
Yeah.
And Yorick's was just like, I strap some stone onto my head.
This be my headstone.
It's like some.
It's like
it's the what is it? What do you call
sky
that?
iron?
The sky iron?
Meteoric iron.
No.
You mean really? What is it called? Iron.
Is it not cold iron? Like the kind of iron that's like you haven't worked it.
Oh,
you just like
pig iron.
Yeah. That's what it looks like to me. It's like he just did the bare minimum to be like, yeah, this is this is like rugged.
I mean, the whole thing is it's meant to be meteoric iron, isn't it? It's literally just fell from the sky and is good iron thing.
Oh my god, you're blowing my fucking mind right now. I had no idea that sky iron meant meteor. I just assumed it was a metaphor. I didn't realize it was a literal description of iron that came from the sky. Sorry, continue. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like we've talked about this in the book
Have
episodes,
we? Maybe
though.
I was asleep or something.
Because we talked about how Lee and York fought together somewhere that a meteor fell, didn't we? Oh my god, maybe I'm mixing us up with a different podcast that I was listening to.
That is amazing, because I can see like mixing up podcasts that you're not a part of, but that's really special to just like project other people's thoughts into your.
So I've also been listening. I've also been listening to the Extraneous podcast on their His Dark Materials episodes, and it is, I guess, I just smooshed their discussions with ours. Whoops. This is what happens when your life is a little too podcasty.
That's a thing?
Apparently I have found it. I didn't know before just now.
No, but I like the point that you're making that Yofer is definitely not compensating for anything. He's just, it's good though that like, I really appreciate like all the contrast in this episode. And you see that like in those two scenes where when Lyra is confronting Yorick and trying to help him and he's pushing her away emotionally and he gets like right nose to her and is like roaring at her to try and terrify her and make her run away, and she just stands there and goes through it and, you know, perseveres, versus like Mrs. Coulter and Yofer, who is like as far away as possible. Like she's barely in the door and she's like, Yofer, we need to have a conversation at a great distance so that, you know, and he very much wants to be with her as opposed to like Yorick, who doesn't want to be with Lyra because he doesn't want to be vulnerable. And Yofer wants approval and inclusion. And so like, it's just all like polarized, and contrasting with each other. They're like inside while, you know, Yorick's outside and just all of this stuff. That's great. And then, you know, he goes into the church, throws the priest through the window, and then comes barreling out of the church while all Yofer wants is to get into that church and get wet. You know, he wants in the church. So it's like, it's just, you know, the entire construction of it is just diametrically opposed in ways that I think are really good storytelling.
It does frame him as gullible as well, which comes back later in the book anyway.
True. Yeah. This is setting him up
I
nicely.
wonder how much the baptism offer makes sense to people who haven't read the book. Because I feel like without having any other exposure to Yofer and like his character, it could seem like it comes out of left field. I guess Coulter's comment about him being the only bear makes some sense, right? Because he just wants to be special. But it's not it's not quite clearly communicated that what he really wants is not just to be special, but to be human.
Yeah, and it's like colonialism 101, right? Like, we are here, you indigenous person that I have helped, we will make you Christian, which will legitimize you with the Europeans, and you will be our peer. I mean, not really, listen, you're our servant, but we're going to tell you that you're our peer as long as you're doing what we say until we come in and take all of your stuff. Yay. So like, that's what she's doing, right? Is like making promises to get in there and get what she wants.
Yeah, and her slightly, in that same scene, her very saccharine nature, and he just doesn't seem to see it at all. He's so wrapped up in, I am the king. I am the only king and there is no other king but me, that he seems to entirely miss this like painfully obvious just sheer flattery. And just makes you think he's not a very clever bear, is he?
I'm so happy that all of you got all this very intelligent stuff out of that scene when all I got was, oh my God, that hat.
We were watching something else. I was showing Christina the pictures that I sent to you in the chat when you were like, oh, this hat. And I was telling her about it, and then we happened to be watching another show where a lady wore like the same kind of hat, and Christina was like, see, that's like what those fur hats are supposed to look like. They're supposed to be huge. And I was like, does that mean it looks good? I don't know. It looks right, I guess.
I'm not saying I am saying it's wrong, but on like an emotional level.
It offends
It is
you.
an evil shape.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not saying the costume department fucked up. I'm saying they have done something to offend me personally.
It sounds like you see it almost as this Lovecraftian horror thing.
Pretty much, yeah. It's who wears a hat that's bigger tthan their head? Why?
I mean, by definition, aren't all hats bigger than your head? Because otherwise, they would be.
Anya, just give me this one thing.
Okay.
I need this.
I didn't get a goose. I need to hate this hat.
So we've talked a little bit before in past episodes about if they're gonna try and play up comparisons to current politics and like try and make things more relevant to our current world in the same way that American Gods has been doing. And if they were going to do something, I don't know, maybe it's just because I spent a bit of time today watching impeachment hearings, but like Jofer Ragnarsson, I feel like is an awful leader in all of the same ways that Trump is just an awful leader. Like totally susceptible to flattery, not very smart, like his everything is about like his ego of being the king or the president or whatever, and like demanding loyalty and fealty rather than actually earning it. And when you go around demanding it like that, like it's never going to be real, right? Everyone is living in fear of, the next awful tweet, but that doesn't mean they actually respect you.
Mm-hmm.
He is sort of shown as this, in the books, as this sort of capricious leader. He's very drunk with power. He kind of tries to do what he wants, but everyone around him is looking and going, I guess I'll play along for now. Which, maybe it's just appropriate that it happens to echo the current state of politics across the Western world, which is a terrifying thing, by the way. Should we?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just fascism.
Yeah.
Or maybe I was going to say, maybe there's always just the assholes in charge.
We just
to some degree, at least.
We weren't quite as unlucky in the 90s.
Depending on where you live.
Do you remember?
Differently unlucky, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
who was president in the 90s? I'm sorry,
Bill
I have no idea. Oh, okay. When was Bush president? Because he was terrible, wasn't he?
He was elected in 2000.
Oh.
I know because I got suspended in middle school for vandalizing a poster of him.
Did you have the snake on your head at the time? You had a golden opportunity there to be the most metal bitch alive.
Yeah.
It's like the most Anya story. Yeah.
That's what you call peaking in high school.
It's on brand.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow. Shots fired.
Well, with all of this political stuff, I did notice a lot of a philosophy called utilitarianism that I think probably, Anya, you know about from watching The Good Place. And it is definitely like in line with this fascism and but is demonstrated here in a really interesting way, I think, because you have various heroic characters using utilitarianism as well as Mrs. Coulter and the Magisterium. So I really liked this. So to explain a little bit what utilitarianism actually is, it is a teleological philosophy. Have you guys ever heard of that? Yeah.
How do you spell that?
So,
Pretty sure I've seen a meme with that.
Teleology? I don't know.
We've talked a lot about that and all of Aristotle's terrible ideas. May he burn in hell. And but the way that I've been talking about teleology has to do with like things. And in moral philosophy, teleology is about what you do. So instead of like, does this phone do what a phone need to do a phone? It is you worrying about, is my action that I'm doing going to achieve the goal that I am trying to achieve? And if it does, then the ends justify the means. That's literally like kind of utilitarianism thing. And the ends there is the telos. That's what telos means. It's like the reason or the ends. So that's why it's teleological. So like, just as an example, there's like a scenario called the dirty bomb scenario. And we're probably all familiar with this idea that there's like a bomb out there and you are in a room with the bomb maker. And if you torture them, then you will get the disarm code for the bomb. But if you don't torture them, then the bomb will explode and a city will be, atomized in a second. So do you torture them? And you can have like a moral actor in that scenario who says, torturing people is wrong and lowers the human dignity of everyone involved. So therefore, I'm going to demonstrate moral courage in the face of this impossible choice and not torture this person and do the right thing. Or you could have somebody who's like a moral coward and says, like, I think I probably should torture this person, but I can't bring myself to do it. Well, the outcome in both of those scenarios is that the bomb goes off. And according to utilitarianism, that means that you did the wrong thing. It doesn't matter if you had moral courage in the face of a choice or if you were a coward and couldn't do the thing that you thought you were supposed to do. You failed to stop the bomb from going off. And so your actions, teleologically speaking, were bad. So utilitarianism is focused on outcomes instead of following rules or breaking rules, which other moral systems are more concerned with.
What if your reaction to having someone be tortured is to bring a small girl child and let her watch it?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So you could have a moral actor in that scenario who is, you start to explain to them, so there's a dirty bomb and the person is already over there because they're sadistic, torturing them. And they're like, the code is 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, please stop. And they're like, yeah, I don't care about that. I'm into torturing people.
I'm just saying Lyra would watch the torture and be okay.
So it's like, in that case, the sadistic person who enjoys torturing people in front of little girls would, because they stopped the bomb from going off, that would be good. It doesn't matter that they enjoy it.
So if you try to stop the bomb going off, you make that moral decision that I will torture this person and I will try to get the codes, and you fail. Utilitarianly, are you better or worse? Are there shades of grey here, or
not really? There's about like 4 dozen different kinds of utilitarianism for exactly this reason, because there's like the big origin of like utilitarianism comes from this fellow named Jeremy Bentham, famous Englishman. And he said the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That should be kind of your moral compass. Don't worry about like rules. You need to use your judgment about, is what I'm doing going to help the most people possible? And then do that thing. Well, the thing there is like, the most number of people, that's pretty easy to understand and define. What's the most good? That's much harder. Because that definition changes over time, because maybe you believe that like people burning in an eternal hell because they don't have a knowledge of Jesus Christ is a really bad thing. And so you're completely justified, because your ends are to give them a knowledge of Jesus Christ so that they can have an eternity in heaven and not burn in hell, to invade their country and, take all of their able-bodied men and put them in chains and make them slaves for your country so that you can give them a knowledge of Jesus Christ and they can spend eternity in heaven. Those ends justify the means by which you did that.
So what are Lyra's means and ends in this episode? I mean, she lies and tricks people to get Yorick to join their party.
So the really easy example here is probably with Lee.
She eats all of his bacon.
So when we first
Unforgivable.
no, that's smart. When we first meet Lee,
But understandable. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Unforgivable from Lee's perspective. Sorry.
I love how she Batman's out of there. He's like, and she's gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Lee appreciates it anyway. He's like, damn, you got me.
Oh yeah, he's like, she's better at this than I am.
She's a real good bacon stealer.
When we first meet Lee, he meets like the authority figure in the town, Sisselman, and he immediately steals his pocket watch. And then later in the episode, when he finds out that Yorick doesn't have his armor, he goes back to Sisselman and he very meticulously lays out the legal reasons why he is entitled to the armor. And so what you see there is that Lee is very comfortable operating outside of the law, but also operating inside of the law. And so he's not operating according to any kind of moral code that is defined by a system of rules that say like never work with the authorities or always work within the law. He does whatever it takes to get the job done.
This actually brought up a question that I had really, really quickly. Was Lee bluffing?
Oh, yeah.
Or did he know all
about
that
the-
stuff?
Yeah, he forged that.
The law stuff.
I think so.
Yeah.
Sorry. What? I didn't catch your answer.
I think he forged that. Like, he did not. The armor is not the Millennium Falcon. He did not lose it in a game of cards. Like, that's not what happened.
I didn't even think Lee was trying to get the armor. I thought he was just trying to feel out the situation there by saying that it was his.
What I was meaning was he just arbitrarily kind of bluffing with the quoting of statutes and, specific paragraphs? Was he just saying, well, I sound like I know what I'm talking about, and so I believe that you don't know it well enough for me to get away with this? Or is he actually a meticulous scholar of law?
I felt like it was showing off a capability of his, but it could be a total bluff. But I felt like he was, that he knew property law like that well because he's an independent operator and has to he's his own lawyer, basically.
No, that's true. And we know that he is, an engineer and a scientist in a way, right? Like I guess maybe we don't know this yet, but in the book we know that he has to, know chemistry so he can create his own gas.
Right. Yeah.
So it fits with his character of being like super capable and academic and detail oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So is he the new polymath?
Yeah, basically. He's like the Renaissance man, right? And that's kind of what utilitarianism is all about, right? Like it's what you use any of your talents available to you and whatever the situation provides to get the job done, because you're not governed by some kind of prescriptive moral code that says like, no, you can never, ever lie in any situation. If you need to lie or steal or murder to get the job done and you're comfortable with that, like utilitarianism says, go for it as long as you accomplish your goal. And that's exactly what we see with Mrs. Coulter. She's not operating according to what you might expect the magisterium to do, where it would have like a prescriptive kind of moral system that says you need to submit to the authority of people who have been placed over you, according to the authority of God. If I say to stop and you're fired, then you stop and you're fired, because that's what we're all about. We're all about rules in this place. And she's not doing that. She is leveraging every advantage that she has in every situation to get the upper hand on people and achieve her goals. And I think that is something that we're more used to when we see utilitarianism, is a kind of like villainous character who will cross any kind of moral boundary. And then usually the hero like lives by a code that kind of reinforces the norms of society. And that's why we're, meant to root for that character, so that we root for law and order and all of that kind of stuff. But this story really subverts that with like Lyra's behavior of, submitting to authority. Once again, you got John Fa telling her, no bears. We're not doing that. And then she goes and gets the bear anyway. And then she's like, it's okay. It's for the best. You'll thank me later. So we're rooting for a character here who is not obeying, authority and the rules and stuff like that. And that's heroic. But at the same time, we have Mrs. Coulter doing the same thing, and it's villainous. And that's pretty crunchy, I think.
Yeah, except one of them is trying to rescue children and the other's kidnapping them and trying to use them.
And I love both of them.
Well, and I think that something that is starting here, because now, like you said, Anya, we're starting to get the Lyra that we're more familiar with from the books. What we're going to see going forward, I think, is an emerging theme of the difference in characters who operate according to the utilitarian values. The main difference here is that Lyra is not affiliated with an institution. And so her goals that she's trying to reach by any means necessary are informed by her personal conscience. While Mrs. Coulter's goals have to incorporate the magisterium's goals. And the chiefest goal of any institution is going to be the survival of the institution itself. And so her goals are limited to goals that do not interfere with the magisterium's, larger survival or identity. And so that warps what she is capable of doing. So like in her case, she said in the previous episode, we have the chance to find out what dust is. And that seems to be what's animating her choices here around children who are not affected by dust. So that's what she's pursuing, but she has to do it in a way that the magisterium, who wants no knowledge of dust to be available to people, can tolerate. And so it's warping her actions into, and warping her personally into the kind of person who like enjoys torture and murder and hates herself.
Yeah, and I think there's a way of viewing the two of them as like Mrs. Coulter is what happens when you take someone like Lyra, who's very curious, very capable, and then don't give them opportunities to actually pursue any of that in a positive or like meaningful way.
I don't know. I've always had a different view of Mrs. Coulter, but that's book Mrs. Coulter, so I don't. They're doing something different with show Coulter. Like I've never thought she particularly cared about her research.
It was all about power.
It was all about power. In the show, I have no idea what her goal is.
No, she's so much more emotionally connected in the show, or maybe more emotionally vulnerable in the show than she ever is in the books at these times. Mm-hmm. That's like a real, not terrifying, but like it's a really poignant moment when you see that Mrs. Coulter, all of a sudden, she has feelings. She has her own stakes in this game. It's not just that she's arbitrary and she's a bad person. She is, in fact, she's got skin in the game, and that's coming across a lot earlier in these shows.
I still don't know what she wants though. Like, why is she doing anything? And I'm not saying that as a criticism. I think I like that we don't really know what her number one goal is.
Yeah.
But I genuinely have no idea. Is it the research? I don't think so, because we haven't really seen her doing that. She seems to want to get away with things, but she doesn't seem to be vying for actual power.
And she wants to have the ability to punish the people, who, like she does at the Jordan College. Because she kind of goes too far there, right? Like, they're like, you made noise,
right, but that
and
could
all that kind of stuff, so.
I don't think she cares about the Jordan College people, though. I think she just wanted to get what she wanted to get.
Like,
and she didn't care.
Yeah, she wants the power to be like, oh, you didn't give me what I wanted, like, burn it down.
Do you think she's just motivated by a feeling of competition with Azrael?
I don't think so, because we haven't seen her really even talk about Azrael. Like,
I mean, she's clearly bitter about him on some level, and
that's the realest shit we've seen from her. is like when she's screaming about Azrael during the, the scene where the two demons are fighting with each other, and she's, yeah.
Oh yeah, she says that he's a bad father and all that. Like that I get, but we haven't seen her talk about him as relates to her goals and what she wants. Like we haven't seen her say, Azrael's getting there before me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no. Or anything like that. But we've seen her. I would say she was upset that he has Lyra's loyalty and she doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that's a different part of her.
But that's not the oblation board.
Yeah.
I would flip it and say possibly that the Azrael plays into the fact that I think the power is her main driver, and Azrael challenges that because he is just as competent, he is just as manipulative, frankly. He is just as ruthless as Coulter, just in maybe on the right side, nominally, not literally with the Nazis.
Right.
But, sorry, it's a very,
I know, they're Nazis, yeah.
They're very, very Nazi, very fascist. But, it feels to me not that Azrael is the goal, but Azrael is just something which challenges her and gets under her skin so constantly because he can do these things. He's the only one that she sees as his equal, and she hates that. That's kind of my read.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say.
I 100% agree with that. I just don't think we've seen it in the show. Like if we had never read the books, I don't think.
I think that's what I was trying to say, though, is what Francis said about the power of like she wants to be invulnerable in every situation. And so like when she went to Jordan College and she's like, tell me about the alethiometer, that it was like, no, I'm not, you fucked up, not me. And then she's like, fuck you. And, and messed them up. And then it's the same when the Cardinal's like, you're fired. And then she sits down and is like, yeah, here's why that's not true. So she never wants to be vulnerable. Like even when she's on the way to Yofer, the monkey is like, hey, are we okay? And she's like, I got this. Like, I know exactly what to say and how to say it. I'm always in control. I'm always on top. And then, when people like Azrael or Lyra, who wants to have a genuine connection with her and not a connection that involves being dominated, because Lyra refuses to obey, therefore she has to, attack her and abuse her until she submits. And instead, Lyra escapes. Mm-hmm. She can't stand that.
I do still dislike the fact that makes this whole thing makes us feel so much more for her demon. And I don't feel that that's the point of that demon at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the books, I would say even when Mrs. Coulter shows other emotions, the demon is still just creepy as fuck.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I think that says a lot about Mrs. Coulter. That even when she's like, actually, I do care, her soul is still like, maybe I could just snap this bat in half? Thanks.
Right.
Yeah. He is the demon inside of her.
Yeah.
What a crude analogy.
Well, I guess we'll just have to see where the TV show goes with her character.
Yep.
And this version of it.
I did want to do another quick Moses connection. Speaking of people who adhere to a code of ethics, a strict code that changes what they want. Like Moses never wants to do what he's supposed to do, and he always submits to the rules that God lays down for him, which is the point of who Moses is. Because he's supposed to be the good example for the Hebrew people, like be like Moses. And Lyra here, being a utilitarian instead of like someone who follows a strict moral code, kind of illustrates that thing that I was talking about last time, Anya. And you were like, what do you mean that she's a girl and he's a guy? Is that what you're saying? And that, she operates, even though she's a heroic moral character, the way that she operates in that morality is like deeply contrasted against someone like Moses, who I feel like the story is appropriating Moses in order to invert his archetype. Like it's a purposeful choice to, reference Moses early in the story in order to subvert him the way that I talked about last time, Moses appropriated, as a character, he appropriated the persona of Sargon the Great and inverted his character, where Sargon the Great was like all about murdering people and dominating them with his martial ability. Moses murders one person and lives with a lifetime of regret over that outburst of anger. And then after that is a pious follower of God and stops doing whatever he wants to do and does whatever God wants him to do. So he inverts the Sargon archetype, and Lyra in turn inverts the Moses archetype in the way that she operates morally. And I don't think that's an accident. Like, that's how you do it. This is why you adapt these archetypes, is to, express the values of our culture in our own time.
Yeah.
I feel like we need another meme now for Moses and teleology together.
Is this Moses?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
To lighten things up a bit, I'm going to bring up another thing that I had a small problem with, the bar fight. Hester's just like sitting there.
No,
Like,
she's
don't get
giving
me
him
wrong.
instructions. She was very
Don't
helpful.
get me wrong. I loved her commentary, but if this were the book, Hester would be laying down some other demons. She would be taking them out.
Yeah.
And why weren't the other demons attacking her? She was just like sitting on the bar, wide open, in plain view.
Where were
I
their
did
demons
wonder-
anyway?
Yeah, I did
Yeah,
wonder,
yeah.
why were the other demons also not providing hilarious and helpful commentary for their humans?
You couldn't hear them in their pockets.
They just weren't funny.
It should have been. It's like WrestleMania, where you have like the Spanish announce table and the Russian announce table and the Japanese announce table, just like all the demons sitting there with their little microphones, narrating.
Just looking at each other
their
like,
person should be
nah,
doing.
we're not doing this.
Yeah.
All the demons were like, "This is stupid. We're just sitting this one out."
They're all at a little table with cards of their own, playing demon poker.
It's like the dogs around the table.
Yeah.
That's good.
But really, though, they should have been fighting
Yeah,
too.
yeah, that's true.
And I understand that the answer to that is money, but
Yes.
still.
But it would have been such a good spectacle. And then you'd see...
It would have been.
And then Hester stops being this, like, Lee's hype man, which she is, but, like, she's also a formidable fighter in her own right. And she has to be. Which...
And also, it brings it back to my whole questions about, like, can we please study demons? Because in the book, she's, like, ripped up a bit.
Yeah.
And has scars and stuff. And I'm like, how... Somebody needs to explain to me how that happens. Did demons bleed? Did demons get hurt? I need answers. Or did she just settle that way because Lee's soul was that way?
Okay, so I know that you can't actually answer this outside of the spoilers section, but I feel like we should at least mention the fact that Mrs. Coulter's question to the alethiometer is, like, super weird and creepy. Like,
Who is Lyra Belacqua?
yeah, because obviously, like, it's her own daughter. She should know. Like, what does that mean?
And I loved his reaction. He was like, shouldn't you of
Yeah.
all people? And then she was like, just ask the question.
It's not always that I feel like the weird magisterium characters are channeling my reaction as a viewer, but that was one time where it was like, yep, spot on. Like, shouldn't you know?
I hope we get to hear the answer. I'm very interested to see what the alethiometer says to her. Or says to Fra Pavel, and then, you know.
I want to say this thing about that particular character, actually, because we get an implication with his interaction with Lord Boreal that he has some kind of deep, dark secret, his predilections, as Lord Boreal is saying. And it made me think of an episode that we did on Hallowed Ground Storycast about And the Band Played On, which was about the AIDS crisis. It's a nonfiction book made into a movie for HBO, and the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. Reading that book illuminated something to me that I had never thought of before, but it like tracks like the political side of the crisis in the gay community. And one of the people in the unfolding crisis is closeted, and because he is closeted, he is available for extortion by his political enemies and the people who are allowing the AIDS crisis to blossom to, basically exterminate gay people in America, like intentionally. And so it would be in his own interest and in the, the interest of his constituency and all of this stuff to like oppose what was going on with the Reagan administration. But when they come to him and they're like, if you don't cooperate with us, then we're going to reveal your dirty little secret, then he becomes complicit with their desires. And it felt like Lord Boreal is saying the same thing to the alethiometrist, or however you say that.
Fra Pavel.
Right. And it was like, you're going to give me a freebie or I'm going to tell everybody, what you do.
I interpreted that completely differently.
It just made me think of that when you are not authentically, like, the reason to come out of the closet, I had always felt like, was to be like authentically yourself. But in a weird way, when you don't have skeletons in your closet, you can't be manipulated. And I mean, like, that's not possible all the time because you might be destroyed for being your authentic self. But, it is an interesting thing.
I thought his authentic self was a pedophile. I thought
that is also like when I started talking to this whole situation with Christina, she was like, yeah, that guy's a pedophile. And I was like,
that's what I thought too. I think especially with the whole like religious organization wearing that outfit, like that's the implication.
I got to admit, my immediate thing was, oh, he's gay.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah, but
that's an interesting that all three women thought he was a pedophile and the two dudes thought he was gay.
Oh no, I also thought he was a pedophile.
Oh, okay.
I thought he was. I just thought it was both, and it was kind of just being like, you're generally, people don't like these sorts of things, but it almost felt to me like they weren't really making a distinction. They didn't really care what it was. They just cared that it had power.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't believe that anyone actually cared that he was doing bad things until they needed to.
No, I don't think anybody cared either. I thought that they were going for the sort of a subtle nod to how, in recent years, actual priests have been discovered to be very
abusing children. In the way that's what this story is about. Is a religious institution victimizing children, and if you're gonna do that, you should do it. And I think that to bring this theme into the story is good.
Victimize children?
No, you're like, if you're gonna
say, wait,
do it right.
Sure?
I mean, good.
No, but if you're gonna put that in the story, just come out and say it.
No. Like, I like that they're bringing this theme into it, and that is not present necessarily in the book. But like, if you're going to criticize the Catholic Church you're gonna say like this story is about victimizing children. Like, bring that element into it that is a real part of a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. Well, and I totally get what you're saying, both in terms of that and in the way that like being closeted can make you vulnerable to extortion, but also there's like a long history of conflating homosexuality and pedophilia, and I want to just be explicitly clear that we are not doing that. One of those is a natural part of the human experience, and the other is a fucking crime. So,
well put.
Yeah. Succinct.
Okay.
I did just want to do a very brief point out that when Lyra's looking at the Northern Lights and she says, "What makes it look like that?" She makes it very she makes it very obvious that she does not listen to our show.
Oh yeah.
We have gone in depth why the Northern Lights are the way they are. And she should get on that.
Yeah.
Wait, so
absolutely.
With these magnetic hats on the Earth,
are there any?
That
is a reference to an earlier stupid thing that I said.
No, he knows.
Noted.
Oh, okay.
But have you looked at the stitching on these magnetic hats?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Not yet. That's like down the line.
Okay, noted.
Earth hats are later after I solve this Lyra hat problem.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
No, that's fair.
Okay, so that's it for today. Next time we'll be talking about episode 5, The Lost Boy, which is spelled the same way in American and British English. If you'd like to avoid spoilers, then it's time to say goodbye. And if you
the
like
Lost Buoy would be a very different episode.
Why is this buoy here?
45 minutes of just an ocean camera. Hope you don't get seasick.
If you like our show, please take some time and leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. I'm Anya, and you can follow me on Twitter at StrangelyLiteral. That's strangely, then Literl.
I'm Caitlin, and you can follow me on Twitter at InferiorCaitlin.
And I'm Francis, and you can follow me on Twitter at Francis Windram. That is Windram.
All right, and thanks so much for being on the show, Francis. This was great.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys. I've really, really enjoyed myself.
You can follow the show on Twitter at MOTPod. So you can live tweet on Monday nights, HBO 9 Eastern Standard Time. Need more than 280 characters to speak your mind? Send your emails to contact@hallowedgroundmedia.com.
And now we're going to talk about some spoilers.
Everyone's special!
Okay, so I know I've talked about the goose a lot, but I did also just want to say that they cut out his whole exposition about other worlds and things to Lyra, which I guess we don't really need since they decided to just show us the other worlds. But I feel like they're cutting out a lot of the sciencey aspects of the book, and I miss it.
And also, Lyra doesn't know it now.
Yeah.
Which is,
I mean, she's seen the other world through the Northern Lights, but I guess that's not the same thing.
I mean, she could have just eaten something funny, like some bad rye bread.
Right.
Just saying. Like, if you see a city in the clouds, you're not going to think, there's a city up there. You're going to think, I'm going mad.
Yeah. So I guess it's not that important, really. And also, they could work it in later when we do meet Serafina.
Yeah.
That's what I expect, yeah.
But
do we know who has been cast as Serafina?
Oh yeah, she looks great. There's pictures.
I think I retweeted that whenever it came out.
Do I remember her name off the top of my head?
No. She's like a waifish lady. She looks good. Looks like a cool costume and stuff.
And then when they went to see the Witch Console did not discuss Lyra's destiny with Barter Quorum.
I noticed that too. I love that guy. He's always good in everything. He did a great job, but yeah, it was weird they left that out.
Yeah, he was really good. I liked him. Just in the books, slight spoiler for book 3, like Lyra overheard that, and you don't find out until book 3. But she overheard them talking about her.
Oh, so
and what she had to
knew
do.
Her destiny. Oh, that she knew that she would have to betray somebody. Was that the?
No, not the betrayal. I don't think they talk about that. I don't remember.
He doesn't give anything away.
There's so many prophecies, I just can't keep them all straight.
But they talk about her having to bring about the end of destiny or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, that one. Okay.
And she does overhear that. Again, it's not that big of a deal because I don't think it would change any of the decisions that she makes in book 3, but just things that they changed. And then, the who is Lyra question from Mrs. Coulter is very interesting because that doesn't really come up for her until book 2. And then she tortures some witches for that answer. So, I don't know what. I'm very intrigued to see what the alethiometer says about who is Lyra.
I thought that did. That, like, independent. It didn't have anything to do with Mrs. Coulter. I thought the alethiometrist did come out and say, like, this is what's up.
Yeah, well, we don't meet Fra Pavel in the books until book 3.
Yeah, that's right.
So I feel like in the books it is said that all the other alethiometers have been destroyed. Okay. Like they say that in book 1, and then you don't find out until book 3 that is a lie either, or at that point people are going through worlds willy-nilly. So either they found one in a different world.
But definitely not a retcon. So yeah. Yeah, it's been a long time. It's been almost like 20 years. So it's interesting, like the things that I do remember and that I don't. I remember one of the Magisterium guys talking about what the answer to that question is, and it's interesting.
But yeah, the Magisterium does have to know, because otherwise they don't send the assassin after her.
Oh God, yeah, you're right. There's some things they're gonna have to kind of paste together in some manner. I'm not sure how they'll do it, but we'll see.
I am intrigued to see. I really want to know what the alethiometer says and what they tell Mrs. Coulter. I hope they don't just not go back to that, because everything's in the north now. That would suck.
That's a good point. I mean, even if they get the answer, how are they going to tell her?
Yeah.
Do they have, like, telegraphs or something? It's unclear exactly what technology exists.
It is very unclear.
It's like there are vehicles, but not too many vehicles.
Yeah. There's a skidoo I saw.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Wait, what's a skidoo?
It's like a snow.
Like a snow tank.
It's like a jet ski, but for snows.
Yeah.
Yes.
I knew what it was. I knew the thing you were talking about.
Motorized skis with
Yeah.
a seat.
I've
I don't
literally never heard of that before.
It's a brand name. It's like
Right.
Hoover.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Also not a word I use, but sure. Kleenex?
Yeah, same thing.
Other than that, I didn't. There wasn't much about future. There wasn't much spoilery
This is all set up.
stuff in this episode. It was, it was all set up. So, yeah.
Oh, interesting, fun, random fact. I'm not sure if you guys have actually talked about this, but you know the place where when he goes through the rift, I can't even remember what his name is.
Boreal?
Boreal, yeah. When Boreal goes through the rift and he comes out in Oxford, that's not actually in Oxford at all. It's in Cardiff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That blew my mind because I thought I go to Oxford really quite often, and I was like, I swear I've been to that place. I swear I've been to that street. Nope, it's in Wales.
Huh.
They just got the buses to write the word Oxford on top and...
Yeah, literally just change the sign. Well, because the B-roll footage is all from Oxford. Like that's notably central Oxford. But yeah, it foxed me and my housemate who has lived in Oxford for 5 years, and he was like, "Yeah, I swear I've been there." No, they just did it so well.
That's funny. Like, I watched a bunch of movies in the early 2000s when Louisiana was like, had all kinds of tax breaks for people to come film their movies there. And the movie would say like, oh, we're set in Tennessee or Georgia. I'd be like, yeah, I know that street in Baton Rouge that you're on right now. I know exactly where you're at.
I mean, I beat all of you. I live in Vancouver.
Yeah.
That's scary.
I have literally taken a bus to work and all the signs around me say San Francisco. What's going on? And then there's like a crushed cop car under some big ass cement, and it's like, great, I'm gonna be late to work because Godzilla's here. Great, wonderful.
Again,
yeah.
Speaking of
Yeah,
sets...
yeah, again.
You know that whale, what am I trying to say? Trollesund is also obviously in Wales, and so a lot of the ice was apparently like wax, and just like, you know, fake ass snow like you normally do. Like the whole thing was just a set. I guess they built from scratch in a completely uninhabited area.
I think it was quite interesting to see how much it looked like a sort of Icelandic or Nordic town or like fishing village, oil port, whatever you want to call it. But also, when you looked really closely, you could see how they just thought about it such that, you know, the place that they set it meant they didn't have to do very much of that, you know, that sort of fake snow, fake ice, which is hard to do, because they filmed it in such a way where there's always going to be like quite a lot of heat around places, like anywhere with forges. It was all set in this town right up until they were actually going out. It was all the very kind of sort of turn of the century industrial landscape. And so just by cleverly thinking about how they showed the whole area, they managed to massively reduce their costs and still make it a very effective show of this is this place.
Yeah, it was very well done. I'll be interested to see how they do like the village that we have to go to in the next episode and all the snow that they have to go through.
Yeah.
All that wax.
The episode title leaves very little to the imagination for what's happening next. I mean, I guess a lot of the episode titles.
Yeah.
It's just a bad rehashing of Peter Pan.
So you're placing bets on whether it's going to be Billy Costa or not?
I think it is because apparently on the HBO showing, or maybe the BBC, I don't remember which one, there was like at the end of the first episode, there was like a preview for the whole season.
BBC ones,
and it showed the Egyptians with like lighting a big pyre.
Oh.
And I think Mark Costa's still there.
It was like when you watch a trailer and it's literally the film.
Yeah. They're exciting. They're well edited, but it's like, whoa, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not sneaky at all.
Well, no, we were all sitting around saying, when's this going to end? This is just like another 5 minutes of show. I'd rather have 5 minutes of show.
So we will see you all next week. And don't forget to steal all the bacon from your new friend.
Men died to not spell it that way.
I mean, not... Whatever.
That's what it was about.
The stupid use. Yeah, sometimes I think Pullman, who gets a lot of questions about how demons work when he's writing these things, is just like, well, let's just really fuck with them.
Yeah, I agree with that.